12:20. I don't have time to go. I thought it was 1 to 3, but it's 12:20. It might be a good idea to do something like that with those of you who like your writing. One of the we already have some a collection of Egyptian myths from you guys. Maybe we could do collections of Greek and there's no point doing Roman myths because the Roman myths are just the Greek ones with Roman names on them. The Romans were really bad at gods. Like they were really bad at them. So they just stole them from everybody else. Anyway, so I thought about that. I thought that might be something that would be fun to do. We'll see as we get farther down the line here. Mr. C has a Mac. Yes, Mr. C does. How do you know that? Yes, Mr. C does have a Mac. What does the review say? The review says the book is terrific. It has one review. Yeah, that's right. It's relatively short. My son is one of the authors in his book. We read it together a few days before Christmas and enjoyed every poem, story, and illustration. Thanks to Mr. C for taking the time to put it together. We loved your story at the end. Merry Christmas from Sam and family. There you go. And a purely objective review by the mother of somebody who wrote a story. What are you going to do? Yes, Mr. C has a Mac. Mr. C also has a PC. Mr. C also has an iPad. Mr. C has lots and lots of stuff. Electronic gizmos of various kinds.
Technology.
I love them. I have an iPad, but I have a Samsung phone. So I have Android and iOS and Mac and PC. Yes, I do.
How do you live with yourself?
I thrive on chaos. Some of you may have deduced this already from having hung out with me. What about a floppy disk? Yes, as a matter of fact, I have a machine right here.
No, Mr. C, don't do it. No. Why? Why?
This is one of the first computers I ever owned. I still have it.
Mr. C, you're killing me.
It does not have a hard drive.
Why?
Because it's a K-Pro 2. But we did have my father has the K-Pro 10, which has a 10 megabyte hard drive.
Ooh.
That's right, people. 10 megabytes.
Woohoo.
Yeah, well, we didn't know at the time that you were going to be uploading 60 gigs of YouTube video every second. Okay, like there was no internet. So we didn't know.
Copeland, who gets to say that you're the better than the best students?
Well, I'm just saying, well, he's turned his camera off now, but he named himself best student, so I named myself better than the best student.
Well, I think I get points for not engaging, except for
you
to
do.
say that.
Oh yeah, you do. Definitely.
Wait, so does that mean everybody else but me and him get points for not engaging?
Sure.
Totally. Definitely.
Yeah, why not? What do you mean no internet, Evan says. Yeah, okay, so my daughter, this is funny story number one of the day. Okay, so my daughter, who goes to school right over here, she's in a, I don't know what class this was. She's in a technology class or something like that. And they were talking about the benefits and the drawbacks of technology. And her job was to write, a pro-technology piece, but also acknowledge some of the downsides. And so she mentioned a couple of the normal ones that anti-sociability and stuff, which has never been proven. And but then she pointed out that it's possible for the power to go out. This was funny because about 5 minutes later, it did at the high school. Like, it's right here. We're all in the same transformer, and there was a bang and then sirens and whatever. Anyway, so the power was out for like a half an hour. So and so she was describing this to her classmates, and they're like, and she says, well, when the power goes out, like, that's a serious problem. And they're like, what? You mean like there's no Wi-Fi? And she said, yeah, or refrigeration, or central heat, or like heart monitors, machines that breathe for you if you're in the hospital. Like, I don't think the Wi-Fi would be at the very top of the list of things you'd be crying about. And they're like, but wait, would there be no Wi-Fi? It's a public school, people. It's a public school. What can I say? It's not peopled by honestly, if I didn't teach homeschool, I would have no hope for the future. I'll be straight up honest with you. I would have no hope whatsoever for the future if I didn't teach homeschool kids. It's not that every one of them is dumb. My daughter goes there, for instance. But let's just say this particular kind of class would be impossible.
That's because we're so much better, because we're totally humble.
That mostly your humility is what makes you better than others.
I mean, I'm the most humble person I know. So.
You need to get out more. All right, so but I intend to have a lengthy reply to your question about, by the way, Copeland, about Speaker for the Dead. I love discussing that book. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about, this is like homeschool gossip hour. Wow. Well, at least I'm providing a public service. I don't know. If you learned something too, that's awesome. If you have notebooks and you plan to note in your books, now's a good time to get those out. Because we're going to talk a little bit about after the Greek Dark Ages, when the Greeks, I got to stop there for a second, because I always start to do these. It's easy to talk about Greek history and the Greeks and whatever, but there really aren't Greeks. I mean, we sort of label the whole country Greece, the entire area, but they would not have understood what that word meant. That didn't mean anything to them. The city-states themselves were sort of their own countries. They would have sort of appreciated the idea that everybody who spoke their language was at least moderately civilized. Why in the world we use paper notepads? Because studies say Mozart makes babies smarter. No, but it does say that that writing things longhand, you remember them better than if you type them. I've not replicated these studies, and these days science is manipulable, so I have no idea if it's actually true. But McKenna thinks it's true, so it's probably true. Anyway, so the Greeks recognized several classes of people, okay? There were full Greeks. I'm just going to use the term Greeks, but really it's just, we're talking about Athenians almost all the time. Sometimes we're talking about Corinthians, sometimes Thessalonians, sometimes Spartans. There's the Becks. They're always late. Hey, the Becks are here. Sometimes you're talking about megalopolisians, or I don't know what those are called. People who live in megalopolis, Spartans and whatever. But if you were Athenian, the Athenians occupy a slightly higher rung on the ladder than everybody else who speaks Greek. Okay. Then probably next on the list would be if they even recognize that there was a next, is like we are here and then everybody else is in a puddle underneath of us. And I guess if you asked them to like grade them out, it would be Athenian men, and then Athenian women, and then slaves, the people who did most of the work in Athens. And then, well, no, I think the free Corinthians and the free Spartans and whatever would be half a step above the slaves. And then there would be the slaves. The working men, the merchants, those guys would all sort of be lumped together. And then comes everybody who doesn't speak Greek. All basically lumped in one horrible, seething mass, a group of people who have neither faith, hope, nor charity, who are, to use a gospel example, who are not subhuman, but kind of. Only like semi-human. I didn't say that, Evan. I mean, I kind of did earlier, but I didn't say it then. Anyway, well, sort of like that, yeah. They're human, but it would be, let's see, the closest analog that I can come up with, I think, is during World War II. If you are a paratrooper, U.S. Armed Forces paratrooper in World War II, the paratroopers are here. The rest of the mobile infantry is here. The Air Force and the Navy is here. Then there's everybody who fights for other countries underneath that. And underneath that is the Germans, who are, I guess, kind of human, but not really human. So
too much fighting.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's hard to grant humanity to people you're trying to kill. It makes it hard to kill them. And so this is actually a fairly routine type of thing. If you look at the cartoons and stuff, the political cartoons, but also just cartoons in the newspaper and stuff from that period, Germans are depicted more like gorillas than humans. They're not really human. And you kind of have to psychologically, you sort of have to do that, or at least so I'm told. I've never tried to kill anybody, but I'm told that you kind of have to do that in order to compartmentalize it in your head, so that you don't, because if you grant them humanity, it makes it really tough to shoot them. Which this is one of the reasons, by the way, during the, you've heard about the Christmas miracle in World War I, where they called a 24-hour armistice during Christmas Day, and they played soccer and traded gifts and stuff between the armies. Have you heard about that? You really should look up the Christmas miracle in World War I if you don't know what I'm talking about, because it's kind of an amazing thing. I mean, they're shooting each other for days and days and years and bombing each other and shelling each other, and all of a sudden on Christmas Day, midnight on Christmas Day, the bells ring for Christmas Day, and they called an impromptu truce and went out and shared cigarettes and traded chocolate and pictures of their sweethearts and played soccer together and stuff. And then the 24 hours is over, and then they went back shooting each other again. But the generals and the officers, they didn't like this at all. They tried to stop it, because if their troops got to know the enemy as people, they wouldn't fight them. So anyway, personally, I'm a pacifist, so I'm not a big fan of war in the first place. So anyhow, if you were Athenian, you saw your society as being better than everybody else's, very much like American exceptionalism in a lot of ways. For those that think the United States is just better than every other country in the world. Having traveled to a lot of other countries, I can tell you that is not a popular attitude in the world, but also isn't necessarily inaccurate in my opinion. I live here on purpose. I could live somewhere else. That's not true for most of you. You live wherever your parental units are feeding you. But my parental units do not feed me anymore. Well, they do if I go there. But because she's a mom, and mom feeds you when you. That's what she does. So, I could live. I speak a number of languages. I could live quite comfortably in a number of other places, and I live here on purpose. So anyway, so the Athenians would have seen that as being the reality of things. Like everybody else, what is the form of government in pretty much everywhere in the world at the time period that we're talking about? And where we are right now is about 500 BC, roughly. What is the form of government in Athens and Sparta and everywhere else in the world, pretty much? Kings, pharaohs. If you were to name the system, that's good, McKenna. If you were to name the system, what is the term for that system of government?
Monarchy.
Correct. Sharp, yes. A dictator is the same thing, essentially. A monarch.
Demagogue.
Yeah, except the demagoguery, we'll get to demagoguery here. Demagoguery is not necessary as long as you have enough weapons. Although usually you get your weapons by demagoguing. Chairman Mao did, for instance. Yeah, it is a monarchy, you can also have you can have an oligarchy. You can have an anarchy, although not really. These are all Greek terms talking about forms of government. A monarchy is a single individual in charge. So, yeah, kings would qualify, and like everybody else, they had kings up to a particular point in time when they decided that they were going to get rid of it. The Athenians are the ones who played around with this. None of the other city-states on the peninsula in what they called the Peloponnese, we call it Greece now, but none of the other city-states seem to have fooled around with that. They pretty much stuck to the monarchical system. They had kings. But the Athenians decided to play around with something a little bit different. Okay, it's not a little bit different. It's radically, insanely different. The other Greek city-states thought the Athenians had lost their collective minds when they did this. But the Athenians decided to have a system called anybody know? First one we know of in the world.
Democracy.
It is a democracy, yes. A democracy. You can have lots of other kinds of crassies.
Don't be crass.
A democrat, the demos, what does demos mean? Does anybody know? It's a Greek term. Do you know what it means? What is a democracy? Like if I ask you to tell me what a democracy is, what do you say?
People. Does it mean people?
It does mean people. Well done, Copeland. That's correct. Yeah, it means, okay, That's the definition. What it means is what Better Bestest Best student says, which is that you get to vote, but only if you're people. Remember, I started off by talking about how the Athenians graded everybody in the world? People stops right at the top. Spartans are not people. Sorry, women are not people. They don't get to vote. Men are not people unless they are native-born Athenians. And you also have to be at least capable of bearing arms at some point during their lives. If you were not willing to or able to fight for the Athenian state, then your citizenship was in doubt. For more on how that works, see Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein.
I was just going to say, it's like Starship Troopers.
We've talked about that, haven't we? Starship Troopers is not my favorite sci-fi book, but...
Oh, it's amazing.
Is it, though? But it's based on the concept that if you are unwilling to, you actually earn citizenship by joining the armed forces. If you're not willing to bear arms to support your country, you don't get to vote.
Which is a great idea.
Which I can't say it's not without a certain appeal. I just am not a big fan of the armed forces. But I do have to say that a willingness to sacrifice on behalf of your nation should earn you something that people who are not willing to sacrifice on behalf of the nation should not get. I mean, does that not make a certain level of sense? Anyway, the Athenians thought so. The Romans also did. They have a different kind of system. You only get a vote if you pay your taxes. Yeah, that's another way of talking about that, which would mean that the voting the franchise in the United States would be really small. Actually, what it would mean is that we almost immediately would make major changes to the tax code, but whatever. But there's a certain level of sense there, isn't there? If you're not willing to sacrifice on behalf of your country, why should you get to decide what your country does? Why should tens of millions... Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Never mind, it was a bad idea.
Well, why should tens of millions of people who are not going to carry a weapon vote for people who are going to make you carry one? Where's the justice in this? You see what I'm saying? Why should millions of people who pay no taxes be able to vote for politicians who will then make tax policy to make other people pay taxes? How is this fair? I'm just saying. You guys have grown up, and your entire life you have lived in a constitutional republic. Or some of you may have lived in other countries, which is educational. McKenna has a reasonable point there. That's a point I've heard made. That does seem to make a level of sense. To conceive of a different form of government, we learn about monarchies, which are dictatorships, kingdoms. There's another word. I can't think of it off the top of my head. Most confusing species in the world. Not getting into that. You can conceive of systems of government in which you might have only one house of Congress, or where you have a king, or that kind of thing. But if you grew up in Athens in 500 BC, you would have only been exposed to one kind of government in your whole life, because that's the only kind of government there ever was, with the limited exception of the Hebrew judges, when the Hebrews, okay, quick digression into the Hebrews leaving Egypt. Remember that? The plagues. I know we talked about the plagues. Those are super fun. That's an interesting point. But do they have more, or do they just show them more?
I think they have more, in my opinion.
Nah. It's an argument you can make. It's impossible to verify one way or the other, it seems to me.
That's what like an EEG is for.
I don't think that's going to work.
Why not? I mean, if we got it at advanced enough fMRI, it might work.
Yeah, why don't you work on that?
I am.
Anyway, so the Hebrews. Whoa, there's Morgan. Morgan is back. I lost her for a moment. And I don't see Emma Cooper either. Anyway, so or Hiram Crossley. I don't see him either. Anyway, so when the Hebrews leave Egypt, they set up a sort of a different kind of government. They don't do this until they get to the Promised Land. When they're wandering around the wilderness, basically it's a theocracy. A theocracy is ruled by what? If a democracy is ruled by the people, a theocracy would be ruled by what? Hang on, Copeland.
A king?
No. No. Not judges either. That's a very good guess, Abby. I like that. Priest is close. That's not what theo means, but yes, functionally, yes. It would be priest. Church. Theos is God. Theos is God. Theodore means lover of God, by the way. So anyway, it was a theocracy. Basically, the prophet ran everything. But then he sort of divided it up after Jethro said, dude, you can't do this. It's too much. And then when they got to the Promised Land, they did have government by judges. That's why you have a book of the Bible called Judges. And the system of judges was unlike anything that had ever been seen before. And it could have worked it did work for a while until the Israelites are like, but everybody else is a king. We want a king too. So then they got a king. The first king in Israel is, do you know?
Israel?
No. He was a tribal chieftain, never king. Who was the first king in Israel? Do you know this guy's name?
Isaac.
No. Much later than that. Not Moses, but although Moses functioned like a king, he was not actually king. Not Solomon, but we're getting very close now. Not Abraham. Very good idea. Abraham was a tribal chieftain. Never actually
Joseph?
king. Not David, but we're getting even closer.
Joseph?
Not Joseph. No.
Hercules.
Joseph was never king. Hercules. We always descend into madness after a minute or two. That's close. Not Solomon, not David. Who's before David? Come on, you know this. Saul! There you go. Saul. First king in Israel. Anyway, the Athenians conceived of this different kind of government. They conceived of a government in which the people could make their own decisions about what would happen in their society. This is pretty radical. The concept of a vote it's pretty weird on a large scale. For voting to happen like in a tribe or whatever, and that had happened before. But you're talking about a big city. Athens is one of the largest cities in the world at this point. How can you do this? How is this going to work? Well, we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. Before we get there, though, we have a king who starts doing a really important kind of thing. The first king to do this is a guy named Hammurabi. You ever heard of that guy? You ever heard of Hammurabi? Copeland has, but Copeland's brilliant.
Yep. Was that his hobby?
No. What is he the first one we know of to do? Glad I did not make you guess that. No, I'm not making you. Abby?
Didn't he write some sort of code of laws or something?
Ding, ding, ding. Abby's rolling today. She is rolling. Yes, correct. The Code of Hammurabi is the first written, kind of the first written set of laws that we have. You should read them. You can get them on the internet, and it's kind of cool. Most of the punishments are death for pretty much everything. Also, the punishments are different depending on who you were. If you were a free person, then your punishments were lighter than if you were a slave. If you were a slave, you committed a crime, basically they just kill you. You're going double-fisted now? You just one instance of Copeland is not enough. You need multiple. Whatever. Anyway, so the Athenians had a sort of unwritten understanding about how the government was going to work. I know. And you're thinking to yourself, wow, there's no way that's going to get abused. And it did. It got abused like crazy. Because if you took over as king, you could remember the sort of unwritten rules a little differently than everybody else did, which means you're going to do things that other people are not going to do. And it's going to be fine, but you're king anyway, so you can do whatever you want when it ultimately comes down to it. The problem is, in Athens at least, if you over-exercise that power, then you get deposed. And that's exactly what happens. Solon takes over and says, what we're going to do is write all this stuff down. So we have it all written down. Now, there's differing opinions about Solon and how he is known as Solon the lawgiver, and is a highly respected figure in Greek history. But there's a fair amount of dispute among historians about how good he was at what he did. Solon writes down a ton of stuff, writes down all the laws, and then he goes on a 10-year kind of vacation, I guess. He leaves for 10 years, just goes off traveling. He wanted to travel the world. Some people say that that's because Athenian society was so happy and prosperous that he didn't need to be there. The king could just go wherever he wanted, and it was fine, and everything was great. And other people say he was running for his life, essentially, that he left because if he stuck around, they would have killed him. Because the laws he wrote down were so crappy that they didn't. Anyway, so there's a kind of a dispute. Solon's laws look a lot like Hammurabi's. They call for death for all kinds of things. So it's not, I don't think we would be terribly happy to live under this code of laws. But be that as it may, he did go traveling. And one of the places that we know he went traveling is a kingdom called Lydia. And did he go to Hawaii? No. This is not Merlin, blow me to Bermuda. No, he didn't do that. I got to pull up a map here. And he went to visit a guy. This is in your reading. here we go. This is in your reading for the week. So if you did this, you will know at least some of the story that I'm about to tell you. We're about to discuss here. All right, so here is the kingdom of Lydia. The Median Empire is over here, Babylonian Empire is down here, and the Egyptians are down here. So, and up here, of course, this is Greece. So Solon comes over here from Athens, sails over here to Lydia, and goes to visit the king. The king's name is Croesus. Raise your hand if you have ever heard the term rich as Croesus. Not very many people. Okay, well, sorry. That used to be a fairly common term. He was reputed to be the richest man in the world. Did anybody read the thing from Herodotus, the little section of Herodotus that I assigned you for this week? Anybody read this? Taya is hiding her head in shame. That leaves me very little hope for anybody else. Abby, you couldn't find it. There was a hyperlink in the email.
Well, I couldn't find it either because it said book I and we couldn't figure out what that meant. I didn't know the reading.
Herodotus is divided into books. For instance, this one says book 1, right there.
Wait, but did I mean one?
Yeah. Book 1. Section whatever. Somebody emailed me about that and I explained that. But even if you didn't have that, there was a hyperlink there to the section. So you just click on the hyperlink and it takes you there. If your parents got it, then that's different. Maybe they read it. Anyway, all right, well, I'll tell you the story. Because it's a fun story. So Croesus is the richest man in the world. He has palaces heaped with gold. He has thousands of dancing girls and roast meat on the bone and, you know, all this stuff. He has tons, and he is the richest man in the world. And so the Solon comes to him and announces himself as being a king of a kingdom over here that nobody really cared about because the Greeks were kind of a backwater at this point, so it didn't matter. I don't think he had power from the people, no. He just was king. So he announces himself as a king from this other kingdom, and Croesus talks to him for a little while and says, wow, this guy's pretty smart. So I want to ask him some questions. So he asks him, all right, look, you've traveled all over the world. You're from another kingdom, you know, whatever. Who is the happiest? Who do you think? He shows him through all of his palaces and his gardens and all of his animals and his women and all of this stuff. And then he says, you know, pretty impressive, right? I'd like to see anybody else order that many cookies. Not likely. And then he says, so who do you think is the happiest man in the world? And what does Solon say? Now, obviously, who does he think he's going to say?
Himself.
Yeah, who does he want him to say? He's like, wow, Croesus, you're the happiest man in the world because look at all this money that you have. But he does not say that. Of course, otherwise we wouldn't be telling you the story. That would be a pretty boring story, right? So Croesus asked him, Athenian guest, we've heard a lot about you, both in regard to your intelligence and your wanderings, how in your search for intelligence you have traversed many lands to see them. Now, therefore, I desire to ask you whether yet you have seen the man who is the most happy. He asked, supposing that he himself was the happiest of men. But Solon, using no flattery, but the truth only. Now, remember, okay, Who's writing this? This is Herodotus who's writing this, right? Is Herodotus a Lydian? Is he a Babylonian? Who is he? Where's he from? Where is Herodotus from?
Is he from Babylon?
No. He went to Babylon, I think. But no, come on, you can do better than that. Who's writing stuff down at this point? There's only one country in the world where they're writing a bunch of stuff down. That's why we have these books. Not China. Greece, yes. China, China's writing stuff down too. Forgot about China. Yeah, he's Greek. So he's going to talk about how wise Solon is because Solon's Greek. Croesus is not. So admittedly, this is biased. Still. Using no flattery, but the truth only, said, "Yes, O king, Telos the Athenian." Not only is Herodotus a Greek, he's an Athenian. So, anyway. Croesus, marveling at that, asked him earnestly, "How do you judge Telos to be most happy?" And Solon said, "Telos, in the first place, living while his native state was prosperous, had sons fair and good, and saw them all grow up. And secondly, he had what is accounted with us wealth, and after his life a most glorious end. When a battle was fought by the Athenians at Eleusis against a neighboring people, he brought up supports and routed the foe, and there died a most fair death. And the Athenians buried him publicly where he fell and honored him greatly." Why does Solon think that guy is happy?
Because his death was awesome.
Because his death was an honorable one. True. And before that, what was his life like? Is it because of his money that he was happy? He was honorable. What kinds of things did he do? Not just honorable, though. There's other things that make him happy, too. What are the things that make this guy the happiest man in the world?
His family?
His family, yes. Family's a great thing. Yes, I think so anyway. I like my family. He had family. He had, quote, what is accounted with us wealth, which, look, Solon knows that nobody in Greece is anything close to as wealthy as Croesus. Like, Croesus would not have been impressed by the level of wealth that Telos the Athenian had. But Telos had family. He was a noble guy, not king of anything, but a nobleman. He had some power, not great power, but how did he use that power? Did he use it for himself? He had good friends, traveled a little bit. How did he use that power? When the state was in peril, what did he do? He went to help. He fought for his country, and he died on behalf of his country, and therefore he is the happiest of men. This is a very Greek way of looking at happiness. This is a different kind of philosophy. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means in a minute. Croesus, marveling at that, asked him earnestly. So when Solon had moved Croesus to inquire further, recounting how many points of happiness he had, the king asked again whom he had seen proper to be placed second. All right, who's the second guy? Solon, however, replied, Cleobus and Biton, since these, who were of Argos by race, possessed a sufficiency of wealth, and in addition to this, great strength of body. Both had won prizes in the games. And the following tale is told of them. There was a feast of Hera among the Argives, and their mother needed to be borne in a car to the temple. That's like a carriage. But since their oxen did not come in time from the field, the young men, barred from all else by lack of time, submitted themselves to the yoke and drew the cart, their mother traveling in it. And so they brought it on for over 5 miles and came to the temple. Then after they had been seen by the assembled crowd, their life came to a most excellent ending, and in this the deity declared that it was better for man to die than to continue to live. So Cleobus and Biton went to the temple of Delphi, and then they died there after having performed this service for their mother. And that makes them second happiest.
Wait, so are we talking about happy now or happy ever?
That is the seminal question, but we can't answer it yet.
Okay.
But that is the seminal question that we're going to talk about here in a second. All right. Thus Solon assigned a second place for happiness to these. Croesus was moved to anger and said, Athenian guest, you have then so cast aside our prosperous state as worth nothing that you prefer us to even men of private station. These are not rich people. These are just a couple of dudes who drew the carriage with their mother in it to the temple. And then they died after that. And those guys are happier than me? Look at all the stuff I have. And he said, Croesus, you are inquiring about human fortunes from one who knows well that deity is altogether envious and apt to disturb our lot. The gods can play tricks on us. For in the course of long time, a man may see many things which he would not desire to see, and suffer also many things which he would not desire to suffer. The limit of life for a man I lay down at 70 years. These 70 years give 25,200 days, not reckoning for any intercalated month. Now, ignore that part. Then if every other one of those years shall be made longer by 1 month, that the seasons may be caused to come round at the due time of the year, the intercalated months, and so on and so forth. Thus then, Croesus, man is altogether a creature of accident. As for you, I perceive that you are both great in wealth and king of many men, but what you ask me I cannot call you yet, until I learn that you have brought your life to a fair ending. The very rich man is not at all to be accounted more happy than he who has but his subsistence from day to day, unless also the fortune go with him of ending his life while in possession of all things fair. For very many wealthy men are not happy, while many who have only a moderate living are fortunate. In truth, the very rich man who is not happy has two advantages as compared to the poor man who is fortunate, whereas this latter has many compared to the rich man who is not happy. The rich man is better able to fulfill his desire and also to endure a great calamity, whereas the other has disadvantages over him. He is not indeed able equally with the rich man to endure calamity or to fulfill his desire, but these his good fortune keeps away from him. While he is sound of limb, free from disease, untouched by suffering, the father of fair children, and handsome himself. If in addition to this he shall end his life well, he is worthy to be called that which thou seekest, namely, a happy man. But before he comes to his end, it is well to hold back and not call him happy, but only fortunate. And Croesus says, what do you know, and kicks him out. So rich people should commit suicide. No. Okay, so that's all sort of flowery language and stuff. Let's boil this sucker down. Why does Solon say poor people are sometimes happier than rich people?
Yeah? A brick. Yeah. I'm sure somebody wrapped up a...
Go ahead, Copeland.
Because happiness is independent of your situation. Largely independent of your situation.
Okay, why is it easier for a poor man sometimes to be happier than a rich man?
Because the rich man is assuming that money will make him rich.
Happy. Money usually does make you rich. However, it does not always make you happy. Why might that not be so?
Because happiness is largely independent of wealth.
Up to a certain point, I think you are right. Why do you think that would be? Stuff makes me happy. Does it, though?
Well, another thing is money can't buy happiness.
That's right.
But it can buy bacon.
It
which is basically the same thing.
Basically the same thing. There's a super cartoon I love. There's a couple of kindergartners are sitting on the playground, and one kid says to the other, you know, money doesn't buy happiness, but it can buy toys. You have to convert it into toys to get happiness. Okay. I actually read an article about this the other day, talking about the happiest people versus the people who have the most meaning in their lives. Bex, are you just waving, or you have something to say?
I have something to say.
Wait. Go ahead, Isaac.
Maybe some of the smallest things are what make you most happy.
On the happiness scale, would you, let's say that we had a graph of the happiness of the people who lived in various nations in the world. Where on the graph would you expect the rich countries to be, happier or poorer?
Richer.
Happier or less happy? Rich nations, are they going to be happier than poor nations or less happy?
Yeah, I was expecting you to be happy, but no.
Happier to a
Put them
point.
away so you won't.
Well, let me show you the graph, if I can find it here. Generally speaking, people in rich countries tend to be happier, and richer people inside of countries tend to be happier than people who live in poor countries. But this does not tell the whole story. Okay, so here's a graph. Let me see if I can pull this sucker up here so that it's easier to see. This will take a second because this is a really big graph here. So, happiness and life satisfaction. Where's our graph? Okay, here's a map of the world. Self-reported life satisfaction. 0 at the bottom, 10 at the top. So the cooler the color is, the happier the people in those countries report being. The warmer the color, the less happy those people report being. What you will notice, if you look at this graph, is that speaking English is a strong predictor of happiness, because the world's major English-speaking countries, England, Canada, the United States, Australia, those are all on the top end of the graph, above 6. There are also a fair number of Portuguese. Apparently it's better if you speak Portuguese in Brazil rather than in Portugal, which is not particularly happy. Canada and the Scandinavian countries report having the most satisfaction in life. However, this doesn't tell the whole story. This is the share of people who say they are happy. Lots of people say that they are happy in rich countries, and less people say so in countries that are poor. But there are some interesting other statistics that are worth paying attention to. One of those is meaning in life by country. People who say they live a meaningful and valuable life. Images. If you put that on a graph, what you get is the opposite. More people in poor countries report saying that they live a meaningful life than people in rich countries. And that statistic is correlated very strongly with rates of suicide. So for instance, if your country is rich, on the survey, you will talk about being happy. However, your country will also have a very high suicide rate, which seems to me like that those two things don't exactly go together. I think maybe we're defining happiness in a weird sort of a way. But if you report having a very high level of meaning in your life, that your life has a purpose, that correlates very strongly with low suicide rates. If you say you're happy, you're sad, wet, and depressed. Yeah, I kind of look at these graphs and go, really? What turns out
is this the book you were reading, or
Lou
did you
Zone's Happiness?
study?
No, but I would love to read that.
It's basically about the same thing.
It was just an article that I was reading, but I'm sure that it's a lot of the same data. So look, here's the deal. When you dig into the data, what you find is that up to a certain point, money matters a lot. So up to the point where you have food and clothing and shelter, money matters a great deal, and a little bit of discretionary income so that you can have like a Netflix subscription or good Wi-Fi or whatever. That matters. Above that, it starts to tail off significantly how much more happy money makes you. For instance, we'll use me as an example because I know me best. All right? I am not a wealthy guy. On a global scale and in terms of history, I'm one of the richest people that's ever lived. But in terms of the United States, I don't qualify as a wealthy guy. Okay? I have to work. I have to work a lot. And I drive old cars, and I have oldish computers, but I have computers. So up to a certain level, I'm really happy, but beyond that, it doesn't make that much difference to me. I'm sort of at the top of the curve, really, in terms of happiness. I'm not a rich guy, but in terms of like the scale of riches in the United States, I'm somewhere in the middle. But I'm not. It would take a lot more money to make me a little bit happier, if that makes sense. I have a family that I love. I live in a place that I adore. I have birds on my bird feeder outside. I have friends in enormous quantities. I have a whole raft of smiling faces. Just most of them are smiling. Some of them are. That's good. Thank you, Josh. I have vast quantities of friends. I have the sum total of the world's knowledge right here on my computer. I can, summon information, music, anything I want. If I would like to hear Rubber Dolly 1,000 times, I can hear Rubber Dolly 1,000 times, both live and studio versions. I have lots of different versions of that. I can even buy a Rubber Dolly if I wish, which gives me a certain level of happiness. There are, of course, people who are substantially richer than I am. Let's just choose at random, more or less at random, Bill Gates, all right? Founder of Microsoft, one of the richest men in the world. Does Bill Gates eat more food than I do? No, he does not. Does Bill Gates have a happier family than I do? No, he does not. Does Bill Gates drive a nicer car than I do? He does. And how fast can he drive that car? Any faster than I do? Does it get better gas mileage than my car? No. It's not even terribly much more reliable than my car. In other words, he's eating the same food I am. He's living in, and he lives in a much bigger house. But how much of it does he live in? Is his bed bigger than mine? What for? I already can't touch my toesies on the end of my bed. Why do I need a bigger one? You know what I'm saying? I eat 3 meals a day. Well, I really eat like 2, but that's by choice because Mr. C does not wish to become Mr. Incredible. Okay? So, except like the strong part, that would, I'm not going to lie, that would be stupendous. But not the fat part. So the gap between me and one of the richest men in the world is really not very big. His billions of dollars more don't give him really more. If you gave me his billions of dollars, I'd be doing the same thing I'm doing now. I'd just be doing it in Boise because I'd be flying my jet back and forth. But other than that, I'd be doing the same thing I'm doing now. So why, plus he has billions of dollars. So how many times a day does somebody call him and ask for money? A lot. Can he just go off to the grocery store by himself? Or he can't do that. Can he? He'd be assaulted. He'd get mugged almost for sure. Or kidnapped or whatever. He has to have guards to protect his children when they go to school because if he doesn't, they'll get kidnapped. Do I have this problem? Nay, my friends, I do not. Nobody bothers to kidnap my children. I've got $1.85, which they can have if they just knock on the door and ask. They don't need to take one of my kids. You see what I'm saying? He has houses and yachts and cars, and then he has to have fleets of people to take care of all that. I don't have any of this. I have a rowboat. It's sitting over there. If you want it, you can have it. Just go and pick it up and take it. I don't even have a trailer for it. I have to take the seat.
Where do you live?
I'll give you the address. I have to take the seats out of my 15-passenger van and shove the boat into it. I'm not kidding. That's how we take it places, okay? So if you have all this money, and this is kind of what Solon is saying to Croesus, look, I know you have all these palaces and all of this stuff, but no, you would not like bodyguards. You would hate bodyguards. I know this from semi-personal experience.
You wouldn't be happy.
I would not be. I don't want people watching me all the time. I don't want to be so important that somebody has to protect me. I want to go to the grocery store and have nobody know that I'm there.
What about a duck knowing you're there?
Well, I would like to have a little bit more money to give away. That would be fun.
The duck is always watching.
The duck, well, right. Yes. I'm afraid that a duck is watching. We talked about that. So, assuming family is your goal, but to have enough stuff to be able to do the stuff that you really want to do, Croesus is talking, look, you only get 70 years anyway. You could have all this money. You have tons of money. Croesus, you are just loaded down with money, and you spend a ton of your time trying to take care of all of it. You only get 70 years. You can't get any more. So until you, and anything could happen to you. This is like foreshadowing, ironic foreshadowing, because Croesus is about to enter into a war, which he thinks that the gods have told him to enter into, because he sends a message to the oracle at Delphi that says, should I invade the Median kingdom? And the oracle says, if you invade the Median kingdom, you will destroy a great nation. And he's like, sweet. And nobody in his kingdom says, could we maybe get clarification on which kingdom they're talking about? Because as it turns out, he does destroy a great kingdom. Yeah, his own kingdom. Yeah, so that's the one that, the oracles are always a little bit. So Croesus ends up a slave for the rest of his life. He was super rich, but then he lost, and he ended up being a slave for the rest of his life. There's another king around here named Midas, who will end up being an advisor, who was also one of the richest kings in the world. The Midas touch, you know that? You turn things to gold, Midas. That's because he was so rich. but he was conquered by Cyrus the Great and spent the rest of his life as a court advisor. So you never know what the gods are going to do to you. The Greeks had a saying, call no man happy until he is dead. This is their philosophy. Yes, you're happy now, but maybe it won't last. You can have more than 70 years. Yes, that's true. And many people do now. But that's, if you set it up as 70, that's about how long you're going to get.
But apparently, like, Gen Z is supposed to be, like, the one that won't live longer than the parents.
I think you will. I think the advances in medical technologies that they're working on right now, if I were sitting in your chair, I would expect to live to be 200 or 300 years old. I would expect it. I
just want to be an upload. Just skip the middleman.
I'm going to live to be 200. I've decided. So, but I will probably be a young child compared to people that you will know in your life. I don't know. Maybe not, but it could happen. So yeah, enjoy the moment, and live in a way that the gods will not decide to smite you because you're all uppity. This is another thing that Solon is trying to communicate to Croesus here. Okay, you're happy now, but what if the gods decide to just hit the smite button? Now what? You know, what can you do about it? Nothing. You can't do anything about that. One day you're healthy, the next day you die of a heart attack, or your kingdom gets invaded. I mean, there's only so much that you can do about any of this stuff. I thought it was a pretty wise philosophy. And Solon is a relatively wise dude, but it's something worth thinking about. There's no, okay, so there's only one God, but he's plenty to handle that by himself. He's got a smite button too, you know. And he's not afraid to use it. This is personal philosophy here, but my advice is to find something that is meaningful to do and do that. Your community, our community, talks a lot about finding your passion or your life mission or whatever. I just read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho the other day. It didn't do anything for me. But we talk a lot about that. Find your life's mission, your passion, your blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm not telling you not to do that. But what I'm saying is that if all you succeed in doing is finding something meaningful to do, something that helps other people and generates sufficient for your needs, that's probably pretty good. And you ought to learn to be. There's a song that says, if you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with. So.
I love it. That's the best.
Isn't that great? It's a great song. Maybe I have the song here. Hold on. We'll have a short.
My mom always says that a life mission is something that will help and benefit other people. And that if it's not benefiting other people, like, it should benefit yourself. But if it's not benefiting also other people, then it's not the right, like, thing to do. But
if you think your life's mission is to not benefit other people, I can tell you right now, you're wrong. That's not it.
Why?
You might really think so, but it's not it. Because it just won't be. You didn't get sent here to not be of benefit to others.
Just because is not an answer.
Some things are
Copeland, I challenge you to go find the answer for yourself.
Oh no, I've already gone down this logical path, and I totally agree with you. I'm just checking to see if you know why.
Why is a tough question, but I know a lot of things that are true, even though I can't explain them. That one happens to be one of those things. I could take a crack at explaining it, but anyway, so yeah, it does. I think it does require being helpful. The Greeks sort of had, but then part of the reason we think this is because we come from the Greek tradition. And the Greeks were really big on this, that a life of service to your community was a big deal. A life of sitting around on cushions in your palaces made of gold, that's not a way to live a good life. Yeah, but the whole philosophy of your entire civilization comes out of Greek and Roman philosophy. All of it. Well, not all of it. A lot of it does come also from Judeo-Christian ethic. But the Judeo-Christian ethic is not different in that way. Jesus was not really all that impressed with people who had tons of money, but he was really impressed by people who were dutiful toward their parents and who served the people around them. So that's very Hebraic, which makes it also very Christian, because a tremendous amount of Christian theology comes out of Hebrew theology. But it's also tinged by the philosophy of the Greeks and the Romans, because our governmental system and most of our society is built on the principles laid down by these guys. Okay. With that as a preamble, we really have to talk about two of the greatest battles in the history of the world. Battles that if they had gone a different way, we would not be here. Or if we were, we would be speaking a completely different language. One of them lends its name to the longest race in the Olympic Games. Also the Olympic Games, also Greek. The Battle of Gettysburg. No. The longest race in the Olympic Games is a
Marathon, and the Battle of Marathon.
Correct. Tell me about the Battle of Marathon. Who knows something about this? No. Well, now. Chariots. Greeks didn't really use chariots. Although it is true that the Persians did. So that probably there were chariots. They
It
don't
was between the Greeks and Persians.
That's correct. Well done. You doped that out. Either you knew that or you doped it out from what I just said. Okay, so the Persians, back to our map. Hold on. I'm going to find a better one. Persian invasion of Greece. Hoorah! That one's too small. That one's too small. That one's too small. That's better. Ooh, that's even better. Let's do that. Okay, so here's our map. Persian invasion of Greece. Okay, this one should do. Click to enlarge the Achaemenid Empire. Let's open this in a new tab. Not the link, dang it. Open image in new tab. Let's do that. Okay, here you go. So here's your map. The Persians under Xerxes come up out of here. Here is for the relationship to the last map we had. Ooh, even bigger. Sweet. All right. So in relationship to the last map that we had, Lydia would be right here. This would be the Median Empire, and this would be the Babylonian Empire. Babylon's way back over here. The Babylonians have been conquered. So in 490, told you we were right around 500 BC. In 490, whoops. I'm going to pop the map back up. The Persians come up out of Persia and cross the Bosporus and the Dardanelles. This is, by the way, the Bosporus is here. The Dardanelles is here. And come up into a land called Skodra, which is now mostly Greece. Greece actually ends about right here. This is Albania, Yugoslavia, and whatever in here. and down to Marathon, where they are opposed by a mighty force of Athenians. The Athenians actually send a guy to Sparta. Okay, so just so you get it, Athens is here, this part of the map right here. Sparta's over here. So Sparta's quite a way farther away, and the Spartans, I guess, pretty much figured they didn't have to worry about it because the Persians weren't going to come all the way over there anyway. So the Spartans are like, well, you know what? It's a religious feast day, so I don't know if we can make it or not. Why don't y'all fight this yourself? So at the Battle of Marathon, the Athenians and the Corinthians mostly took the brunt of the fighting. And they were successful in defeating the Persian land army. Now, then the reason we have a marathon is what? Who knows this story? Yay, Bex.
Don't they send like a man and he like runs a long way and then he gets to the end of where he needed to go and then he like tells them the news and then he dies and then they called it a marathon, I guess.
Correct. That's in broad strokes, yes. The guy's name is Phidippides. I know, everybody laughs about poor Phidippides. But Phidippides is the guy who ran from Marathon to Athens. How far is it from Marathon to the Acropolis in Athens? Do you know?
26 miles.
What?
26 miles.
26.2. Why, yes, it is. 26.2 miles, which weirdly enough is the same distance as a
Marathon.
As a marathon. Yeah. Wow. What a weird coincidence. I'm sure they have nothing to do with each other. Actually, they do. So Phidippides is supposed to have run from Marathon to the Acropolis in Athens, where he utters the immortal word, victory, and then dies. Seriously. Okay, now, first of all, 26.2 miles is a long way to run, but it's probably not going to kill you. So that always seemed a little weird. Modern scholarship debates quite a bit over what actually happened here.
He was out of shape.
Phidippides was an old fat dude, and that's why he died running.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not impossible. But
that's why he wasn't in the army in the first place.
But here's what probably happened. Here's what probably happened. There is pretty good evidence that somebody did run, but almost certainly he ran from Marathon to Sparta and back to Athens. That's about 100 miles.
They do have 100-mile races.
They do, yes, but sane, rational individuals do not run them. So then they were like, we got to make a sport. This is so awesome. You run this and then you die. This is great. Let's make a sport out of it. That does sound very human. It also sounds very Greek, to be honest. But there probably really was a Phidippides, but he probably did not die after he came and brought the message. Or if he did, it's because he ran a whole lot farther than just 26.2 miles. But that's where we get marathon. But even though the Greeks won at Marathon, they still had not won the war. And they needed to win additional, but they turned the Persians back. And the Persians didn't come again for about another 10 years. But then about 10 years later, they did. And let me see if I can find a good map of the second Persian invasion. First Persian War. Second Persian War. Let's see if this will work. Be big and good. Yay! Okay. Xerxes doesn't come back again, but his son Darius does. And Darius, he's bringing a much bigger army and a huge navy along with him on this particular journey. They are bent on conquering the Greeks because the Greeks keep invading, or not invading, but they keep picking off their towns along the edge of the Mediterranean.
Was he very?
What?
Was he very daring?
No. This Darius is better, though, than the next one.
Question.
Yeah.
What are the Thermopyles? And why do they have such a cool name?
I will tell you. I'm glad you asked. Les Batailles de Thermopyles. This is a French map. That's fascinating. Okay. Now I got to back up. The Persians are bringing an enormous army. There are, it depends on who you ask. Herodotus says roughly 1 million people. That's a really big army. That's a really big army. Feeding 1 million people is almost impossible without modern technology. So the chances that it was really 1 million people are not terribly great. Because it's just, you just can't feed that many people. Besides, think of all the poop. Like, where do you put it all? So, what, you think Persians don't poop? They poop like everybody else does. You got to find a place to put this.
Everyone thinks they're not human.
You put it in a bottle?
That's a big bottle, brother. That's one giant bottle. Yeah, it's pretty hard to figure out how you would have moved that many people and how you could feed them, and then what do you do with their dung, etc., that kind of thing. It's so probably not quite that big, but could have been as many as 250,000, which is still, I mean, that's an insane number of people. That's an insane number of people, and an army way bigger than anything the Greeks could possibly put together. They marched very rapidly, and they took over Greek towns all the way, you see up here. You have, there's Greek towns all the way along the ocean here, and they're picking them up and executing all the people or driving them off or whatever. And this is a wonderfully great army, to use a phrase from the Book of Mormon. And the Greeks are trying to get their group together to oppose it, trying to get their stuff together, but they're having trouble getting enough, raising enough men, getting enough arms, armor, that kind of thing, and they need time. It becomes pretty obvious early on that they are going to, they're not going to be able to stop the Persians and they're going to have to evacuate Athens. But they need time to get the men, to get the women and the children, everybody out of Athens. They need time for this. And they don't have it because of the speed that the Persians are marching at. So the Spartans volunteer to essentially fight a rear guard action to delay the Persians long enough for the Athenians to get Athens evacuated. And this is the Battle of Thermopylae.
Much less cool when you say it like that.
Yes, also known as the Hot Gates, which is what Thermopylae means. Thermo, thermos, exothermic. Therm means heat. So
yeah, but thermopyle sounds like something radioactive.
Okay, you can call it that. The good-looking. No, not if you go there. No. All right, so here is a little bit larger look at it. Oh, I got to admit Mary Brailsford back again. Yay. Okay, so this is a mountain. This is a mountainous region here, and hiking over it with that many people is impossible. Besides, chariots really do not like mountains. So they are going to come down on this narrow pass by the seashore, and right here at the Défile des Thermopyles in French, or the passage of the Hot Gates at Thermopylae, they are going to stop them here. The Spartans send a very small number of people to oppose such a gigantic force. The legend is that they only sent 300. This is probably not quite true, but it probably looked like it was true. They sent, do they use elephants? No, the Greeks don't have those. Also, the Persians did not use elephants, although if you watch the movie, which was an incredibly silly film, they had elephants, which is just dumb. They did not. They did not have elephants. But they did have a gigantic number of people. And to oppose them was a very small force of Spartans. It was probably more than 300. It was probably more like 3,000. But even so, against 250,000 people, that's not really relevant. But the passage is so narrow that the Persians can't get by them unless they got to go through them. And going through Spartans is not an easy thing to do.
Agreed.
In fact, they find out that they can't actually do it. Well, for a while. They bring up their army, but what happens, let's talk a little bit about this just from a military tactics standpoint. Why do you want your, if you have a small number of people, what kind of ground are you looking for to fight on if you're fighting a much larger force? What do you want? What kind of ground do you want for this? High ground is good. Yes, if you can get it, high ground is good. But that's probably not going to be enough.
Enclosed.
Right. Narrow. You want narrow. Take a look at the room that you are in. Okay? In the room that you are in, if there were 1,000 people attacking that room, how many people would you need to block the door? 10? That's 2 maybe? Not many. 10 would be great because then you can push on each other, but if you're in the front, you're going to get squashed. 2, 3, whatever. So having 1,000 men, is that really going to help you that much? Not on that kind of ground. And that's why the Spartans chose that particular area to fight them. Because it's so narrow, it literally is only about 100 yards wide, maybe a little less. When the tide comes in, it's even less. So they can't go through the ocean on one side. They can't go up over the mountains on the other side. They got to go through the Spartans, who've erected a barricade and are essentially standing behind the barricade with these 20-foot spears, stabbing everybody who comes anywhere near the barricade.
It's like we said with the money. Just random thought. It's like we said with the money. After a certain point, you don't need any more. It's not going to help.
Any more isn't really going to help you that much. A little bit, but not that much. The biggest danger for the Spartans is that they're going to get exhausted killing people because the Persians can't get at them. Their best stuff is their cavalry, which you can't use in this battle because where are they going to ride? There's no place to go. And their chariots, which they can't use because, again, the horses have nowhere to go. So they bring up their huge infantry and they send them at the Spartans, who basically just stab them all to death. With their 20-foot, they can't even get close enough to kill these guys. The Persians, this is one of the first instances of trash talking in battle that we know of. Seriously, multiple witnesses recorded this. The Persians are standing on one side, the Greeks are standing on the other side, and the Persians yell across, "Our men are so many that when we fire our arrows, they will blot out the sun.
Poop.
And the Spartans yell back, good, we prefer to fight in the shade. I know, right? That's the Spartans. The Spartan commander, his name is Leonidas. Yeah, roasted, seriously. Oh, you love these guys. They're the best. Their arms are so tired from killing people. They're not taking a lot of wounds. The guys can't get to them. And there's piles of bodies in front of them.
That's pretty brilliant.
It makes like a second wall because there's this pile of bodies in front of them. For a week, they attack these guys and they can't get past them.
At that point, things start rotting.
Yes. Oh, I'm sure the stench was something to behold. But Darius is like, we can't, okay, there's got to be a way to do this. So he sends a scouting party up into the mountains and they find a shepherd. This guy's name, by the way, is still a curse word in Greek. Ephialtes is the guy's name. He's a little shepherd living up in the hills. And probably these giant Persian dudes came up and said, we're going to slaughter your entire family if you don't tell us how to get up over the mountains and get behind these guys. So he does. And that's this little, I got to share my screen. Okay, so right up here, there's a passage through the mountains, and the Persians send a couple thousand guys up and over the pass to get around behind the Spartans so they can finally get them out of the blipping way. All of the Spartans die.
You mean out of the Ephialtes way?
Right, out of the Ephialtes. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. So that they can get by, and they do get around. They finally get around behind the Spartans, and they kill them. The Spartans know they're coming. There are some versions of the legend in which Ephialtes actually warns the Spartans that this is going to happen. So the Spartans know they're coming, and they fight to the last man. They all die, every one of them. If you go there, and you can go to the battlefield now, there's a monument to the Spartan 300. It's something I would really like to see, by the way, those of you who are going to Greece and Rome. If we have a chance to go to Thermopylae, I'm going. Also, I kind of want to run the marathon. Like the marathon. You know what I'm talking about?
You'd have to get in shape first.
You have a year.
I could die, though. I could run it and die.
Well, I think you die.
Very tempting. Hey, yeah, you died an honorable death.
I'm happy. Hundreds of thousands. Well, not hundreds, tens of thousands. The numbers that they use for the people that were killed is almost impossible to believe, but like 75, 80,000 Persians died trying to dislodge 3,000 Spartans. Or
You said it was 300.
In the legend, it's 300. That's what, I mean, the movie is 300, and that's everybody talks about the Spartan 300. Look it up. But it was probably more than that. Even if there were only 300 like official Spartans, they also had their squires and they only counted remember, they counted people, not people who were not people. They didn't count those people. They didn't matter, but they still fought. The Spartans are seriously what's the closest? The Spartans are like the Avengers. You don't mess with these guys. They're gonna take you. And they actually will end up conquering most of the Peloponnese eventually, but that's next time.
Aquaman versus all of the Avengers.
Okay, I'm not seeing that film. Anyway, so after the battle, the Persians march on, and they do take Athens and burn it. The Athens had been evacuated at this point. But in order to supply their army, they had a huge fleet. And the fleet comes down around the edge of Greece here and comes up to the port of Salamis, which is by Athens. And there they are defeated by the Athenian fleet using almost the identical tactics that the Spartans used at Thermopylae. Apparently, they didn't get the message. And so the Persians tried to take their fleet into the harbor. It has a little narrow passage into the harbor. So the Greeks just bottled them up in that passage and then set fire to their fleet. Pretty awesome. And wiped out most of the fleet. The Persians, now not being able to resupply, have to try and go back home, and they don't make it. Well, some of them make it, but their army does not make it. They march up here, and then instead of going back up the way they did before, they come across Thebes, and then they meet a Spartan army at Plataea and get defeated because you don't beat the Spartans. These are two of the greatest battles in world history. If the Athenians don't win at Marathon, and if the Spartans don't delay the attack on Thermopylae, it's quite possible that we're all speaking Persian now. And the reason I love telling these stories is because I love the heroism of what was done here, and I like imagining alternate histories in which different things happen. Plus, the burning of the Acropolis in Athens is going to make the Greeks very, very angry at the Persians. And for a long time, this is not going to matter. But about 150 years later, there will be a guy who will take the fight to the Persians, and he will punish them severely for having done this. But we'll learn the story of Alexander the Great another time. Okay, couple of other things to pay attention to. Talking about Greek democracy. Greek democracy is nothing like what you might think a democracy would look like. First of all, we already talked about only a certain group of people could vote, right? Only landowning military men, essentially, were allowed to vote. Women could not vote. Slaves could not vote. Women cannot hold office. Slaves cannot hold office, obviously. You have to be a natural-born Athenian, and you have to be, military and that kind of thing, all the stuff we talked about before. But even that, in a democracy, what do you vote on?
Everything, ostensibly.
Ostensibly everything, that's right. So instead of sending a representative, a congressman, or whatever to Congress to vote on things, you would vote on it. And everybody would, well, not you, because you're too young, but I would get to vote on everything.
Hey, I'm not too young anymore.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, so you get to vote too. National Peanut Butter Month, you get to vote on that. There really is one, actually. You would get to vote on the budget. You'd get to vote on
peanut butter.
You could vote for National Hating Peanut Butter Month, I guess, too, if you want. National Chocolate Eclair Day, you get to vote on all. There is one of those, too, by the way. You get to vote on all that stuff. You get to vote on everything. Tax policy, military policy, the budget, everything, which is kind of unwieldy. It also tends to keep the number of laws to a minimum because people have to actually farm and stuff. Otherwise they starve. So voting on everything is not like it is today, where you have a new law every 25 minutes. You don't have that. But you do get to vote on everything. The people who are running the country are actually called archons. And the archons, I have a video that I'll email out a link to that really describes this stuff. The archons are a group of about 300 people who sort of, they're sort of the executive branch of the state. And they take care of maintaining public buildings and those kinds of things. And those people are chosen by lot. everybody's name goes in a big pot, and then they choose them out. There's no campaigning. You have no campaigns or anything like that at this point in Greek history or in Athenian history. Everybody else still has kings. So it's a very different system than the way that we think of, but still, it's a radical idea that the people who live in a country should be the ones who decide what happens in that country, what kind of government policy they should have. Actually, I kind of like the idea of choosing people by lot. I used to say, or I used to bring that up, and people would say, well, then you're just going to get government with a bunch of idiots. And now they don't say that anymore, because voting apparently gives you that same government. So instead of having some poor idiots and some middle-class idiots and some rich idiots, you just have a bunch of rich idiots. But I don't know why that's better. Seriously, I think the country would be much better off if they had just sort of at random grabbed kids out of my classes and make them in charge.
That's because we're homeschooled.
Well, that's part of the reason, yeah. But you guys would be awesome even if you weren't.
Well,
yeah. Anyway, so pay attention to that, because when we talk about a democracy, we really don't mean everybody gets to vote on everything. What we really mean is some people get to vote on a few things. But the concept is pretty interesting, and it will definitely influence the founding fathers when they found the United States. One more thing I need to mention. There's a guy whose name you should know. His name is Demosthenes. Do you know this guy? It appears that Copeland knows this guy.
Is he, at all related to Locke, John Locke?
No. No. Is he a swear word? No. He is a famous orator. He is one of the most famous like speaker in Greek history, and one of the most famous in world history. He was born poor, very poor. His parents died when he was quite young, and he had no money and no real way of getting any. Like, if you were born poor, you pretty much stayed poor. It was pretty tough to make your way unless you went into the law. But if you were going to be a lawyer, you had to have a really powerful speaking voice. Thank you, McKenna. Spoilers. Yeah, that's pretty good. His inheritance was mostly gone, but in order to get it, he had to go to trial against the people who were keeping it from him. So he knew he was going to have to make a great speech. He was not a great speaker. He had a weak little voice. He was an asthmatic, probably. They mentioned he had breath problems and that he stuttered. So this is not a good basis for being a guy who's going to make a great speech. So he knew he had to practice. So he started running in the hills to build up his lung capacity. He also would go down to the beach and fill his mouth with pebbles and make speeches with pebbles in his mouth to teach his mouth to make clear, to be able to speak clearly, even though he had a bunch of stuff in his mouth. Also, if you've ever been to the waves at the beach, they crash all over everything, and the waves are very loud, right? So he had to be able to speak over top of that, and he did this for years. He would run along the beach with pebbles in his mouth, and then try to make a speech while running down the beach with his mouth full of pebbles. Okay, after a while, he develops this really powerful voice, and he learned to speak. He wins his own inheritance, and then he becomes the most famous lawyer in Athens. Everybody wants Demosthenes to come and speak for their case, because if he does, they're going to win. So instead of saying yes to everything, he starts saying no to all but like 1 or 2 cases a year. He charges huge amount of money, and he only does 1 or 2 cases a year. He was so popular that if people knew that he was going to be arguing a case, everybody, it was like a national holiday. Everybody quit work and everybody came in to the arena to hear this guy argue this case because he was so awesome. Yeah. Oh, Demosthenes he's one of my heroes. I love this guy. So let that be a lesson to you. Just because you may have started off small and not terribly strong, and maybe you stutter, you have a speech impediment, or maybe you live in a tiny little one-horse town and nobody's ever going to hear from you, that is no reason why you can't become something phenomenal. You totally can. Even if nobody's ever heard of you, doesn't mean you won't be phenomenal. But the thing that made Demosthenes great was not luck. It was work. Demosthenes put in the work for a long, long time. You want to be rich and famous? That path is open to you, but put the work in to get there, or you won't make it. Here endeth the lesson. And I hate that Andrew always gets like 5 minutes at the end. He doesn't even like get the whole. I hate that. I know it's time to go when Andrew comes walking in the music room at the back, the Mighty Mighty Beck family, because then I know.
I don't think he wants to come.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to hear that.
Wait, Mr. C.
Out. It's okay, Mr. C. We still love you.
That's not how I cry.
Duet.
No.
That's not how I cry. Okay, so we do not have time to talk about Plato and Aristotle, Aristophanes, Euripides, Eumenides.
All the good guys?
Yeah, we'll get there though.
Oh, okay.
Mr. C.
Yes.
I have a real kind of question for you that I learned. What is the longest one-syllable word you can name?
I don't know.
Have you guys been listening to Beyonders?
No?
Yeah, he's been reading it.
I'm asking Mr. C, Taya, not you.
Yeah, I don't know. You'll have to tell me.
What, I think? What's the longest one-syllable word?
You have to think of it yourself.
Oh.
All right. I'll work on that. It would be easier to love you with a little cheddar cheese, especially the extra sharp kind of cheddar. They're so perky. I love that. But that's not what he said. As long as you have access to the nets. Okay, so we have so much stuff. There's no way we're going to get through it all. Okay, I think I'm coming up there the first or second week of February. I got to look here. But we have at least one, and I think 2 more of these before that. I don't know. Where's my calendar? No, not that. No, not that. Wow. Oh, okay. All right. So
Eliza touched your nose.
one more. The 25th. We're going to talk about some about Greek plays and Greek philosophy. I'm going to send you things you need to read, and you really need to read them because Socrates isn't going to make any sense if you haven't read some of this stuff. Copeland's very excited. Then on the 8th of February, I will be in Idaho again. You need to have your dramatic selves ready to go. There will be, we may or may not put on a Greek play. Possibly complete with music, because I am of the opinion that
Are we supposed to dress up then?
1,400.
I don't know. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Please, can I wear a Greek outfit?
Sure.
Please.
Sure.
Please.
Sure.
Also, you should come down tomorrow.
Stop begging. He's saying yes.
Yes. Yeah. You sure? I think that Greek plays had music in them and dancing. We don't know, and I'll explain why next time. But I think they did. Greek drama.
Do you think they had couple dancing? Like ballroom?
No, unlikely. More like interpretive dance type thing. Like, I do not think there was any couple dancing. The tango doesn't show up until 1921, 1922. So no, I don't think so.
That sounds scary.
Okay, but ballroom dancing was before 1920. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, okay, but
Like,
1919.
yeah, they weren't doing the foxtrot either. Okay, you need time signatures to have ballroom dancing. They didn't have them.
They didn't?
No. You don't get time signatures until around 1600. Believe it or not.
What did they do for music that entire time?
Let's talk about that another time. I have an entire music lesson about origins of music and how it started and how you get musical staves and how you get, because they didn't have those either, and musical notation and time signatures and ancient instruments and all kinds of stuff. But we just don't have time to talk about it. The first musical instrument probably was somebody's head. It was almost certainly a log and a stick, the first musical instrument. Oh, it's fun. I love it. And then I play you music all the way through from the very music.
Just not my head.
Yeah.
From modern times. Josh is gone. Now I can do whatever.
In a stomach.
Yes, you can do that as well. Oh man, I gotta go on a diet. There's too much jelly in my tummy.
Well, you make a better instrument.
Yeah, great. It's not very good for rebounding, though. Okay, so we'll talk a lot about Greek drama and how that stuff happened, and I actually have a modern translation of a Greek play that we could do. If you seemed quite enthusiastic about that, so we'll probably do that. There will be homework, yeah. This time there will be, and I will have to email you, Abby. So watch for that. And yes, you may wear Greek outfits if you want. Well, I will see everybody in 2 weeks on the 25th, where we're going to talk about Plato and Aristotle. We're going to talk about Greek atomic theory, because the Greeks had an atomic theory.
Yeah, it was Rachel's favorite.
What?
I said, I did. It's unmuted. Oh, Plato's my favorite.
Ah, yes. Plato's weird, though. Plato's
We have to go. Sorry. Bye.
nuts and weird. Yeah, it's okay. We're done, so you can leave if you want. In fact, I have to go teach a writing class, so I have to buzz as well. I will email you. Watch for that, and in 2 weeks, I will see you all again.
Did you miss my beautiful voice?
I missed your beautiful voice. I missed your beautiful face, although I didn't see it much.
No.
Okay, so that's the news. Watch for that email, and there'll be then I'll see you guys in person in a month, but I'll see you electronically in 2 weeks. Jetties.